Test. Okay. Good morning, Bible study class. I am apologizing, 10 minutes late again today. I think I'm going to have to move the start time of our Wednesday morning class to 10:30 because it seems like every day there's something that causes me to be not here at 10, and I'm sure some of you will have checked to see if I was here and then thought, no, he's not doing it today. Anyway, hi. Welcome back to this class of reading the Bible and reading it with a critical eye, meaning a willingness to really be careful to understand what they meant and not rush to an understanding first about what we think it says, but being careful, critical and careful. So we are reading the Psalms, and we are at Psalm number 7 for this day. This is a psalm that very specifically, in fact, it's the first of the Psalms we're reading that historians, for a variety of reasons, believe this may actually have been a psalm of David, a psalm written by David, because it involves a specific situation in which the psalmist, whoever wrote it, is being falsely accused. And there's clues in the text for what the writer is accused of doing, and some of that are things that only someone that has the power of a king or a ruler could do. So we'll read it, and then we'll discuss it, and then we'll also hold on to it until its relevance for our lives begins to appear as we listen to it. I'm going to read again from the translation which is in the scholar's text, because some of the words are important as they're presented. But it's close enough to the RSV and the NRSV, so you should be able to follow along. We're reading Psalm 7, 1 to 18, Prayer of a Person Falsely Accused. This is called a Shiggaion of David, which he sang to the Lord concerning the words of Cush, a Benjamite. O Lord my God, I have sought refuge in you. Save me from all of my pursuers, and deliver me, lest they should rip me like a lion tearing me up, with no deliverer. O Lord my God, if I have done this thing, if there is injustice in my hands, if I have repaid my ally with treachery, and rescued his adversary empty-handed, let an enemy pursue me and overtake me, and let him trample my life into the earth, and let him lay my glory into the dust. Arise, O Lord, in your wrath. Lift yourself up against the furious outbursts of my enemies. Awake, O Lord my God, declare a judgment, and let the assembly of peoples gather around you, and above it take your seat on high. The Lord adjudicates the nations. Judge me, O Lord, according to my righteousness, and according to my integrity, O Most High. Let the evil of the wicked person come to an end, but establish the righteous, and scrutinize the thoughts and emotions. O righteous God, my shield is upon God, the one who delivers the upright of heart. God is a righteous judge, but God is indignant every day if a person does not repent. God sharpens the sword, and he has bent his bow and prepared it, and for it He has made ready instruments of death. He will make his arrows fiery shafts. Lo, he is in labor with iniquity. Oh, wait a minute. I think I skipped a thing. I'm going to go back. If a person does not repent, he sharpens his sword, he has bent his bow and prepared it for it, and he has made ready the instruments of death. He will make his arrows fiery shafts. Lo, he is in labor with iniquity, and he is pregnant with mischief and gives birth to falsehood. He dug a pit and excavated it, and then fell into the hole he was making. His mischief returns upon his head, and his violence descends on his forehead. I will laud the Lord because of his righteousness, and I will sing the praise of the name of the Lord Most High. Let us pray. Oh God, in our human experiences, we know that there is justice and there is injustice, there is right and there is wrong, but we don't always know where we figure into it. We are never clearly one side or the other. But we listen today to this prayer and know that you are the one who's concerned to sort that all out and to affirm our righteousness, our good intentions, our good actions, and then to set at naught plans by others or ourselves for hurt or heartache or injustice. And pray your light shine upon us as we study today. Amen. All right, so I started out by saying that it appears that this psalm was written by David. I'm not going to go into the details of it, but the absence of other evidence and also the fact that it has the marks of an ancient text. It's old. And there was a period of time, if you've read the book of 1st and 2nd Chronicles and 1st and 2nd Kings and 1st and 2nd Samuel, you know that in the story of Israel, the people who were delivered out of bondage in Egypt, they arrived in the promised land. The 12 tribes divided up the land. Then there was a period of time where the administration, the government of the people was, God was the ruler, and they tried to follow with just God as their ruler, their guard, their guide, their protector. They did not have a king. But that seemed to not be working, at least from the people's point of view, and so they anointed a king. They said they wanted a bigger government. They wanted a more substantial army to defend themselves. They wanted a leader. They wanted someone to now be the intermediary in government between God and them. So they pushed the prophet to anoint a king. And he did so unwillingly, but anointed Saul. And Saul did not perform as a king, as a ruler, the way that many people wanted him to. He was not he was not warrior enough. So he was rejected as king. Even though he was anointed by God, he was rejected. And Samuel removes the blessing of God and then anoints David. In that period of time, David as a king faced a lot of resistance. There were armies loyal to Saul. And there were only originally a few well-trained soldiers who were loyal to David. And so the Bible describes a period of contest between these earthly leaders, which is where many of the imaginations of the Psalms, as Psalms of David, are written. And in this particular text, a Benjamite. Now, the tribes all had the names of Abraham's children. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Jacob had 12 children, and they became the 12 tribes of Israel, and each of them formed dynasties, families, and Benjamin was one of Jacob's favorite children, along with Joseph, and his descendants were called Benjamites. So the threat that is at the heart of this is not a threat from an outsider. It's not, this is not a foreign enemy. This is a family member. And so his name is Cush. It's the only time we learn about him at all, we ever hear him, but Cush was a Benjamite, and he had a charge to lay at David's feet. And I'm going to give it to you just in simple narrative form. What David is accused of is that among the 12 tribes there were treaties of mutual defense, a little bit like NATO. And the idea was that inside this tribal treaty of the Israelites, the enemy of any one of the tribes is the enemy of all. And the friend of any one of the tribes is the friend of all. Now, I'll read it to you so you can hear it. What the psalmist says is, defend me, O God, because I am being accused, and I'm being accused falsely. And I'm being accused of having violated a treaty with the Benjamites. And the specific violation is that David is accused of having aided an enemy of the Benjamites. That's what's at stake here. And worse, David is accused of having aided the enemy, but for no particular reason. There was except maybe to go and call favor with a force outside of their alliance. It's a serious, serious charge. And I mean, we live through this now too, right? We see our own leaders being charged of going to our enemies, perceived enemies of some, and making alliances with them outside of what's considered to be, this is our friends. These are, the enemy of my enemy is my enemy, and the friend of my friend is my friend, and trying to keep the loyalty, especially among nations. This is very important diplomatic kind of stuff. And violations in these areas are considered massive steps of injustice. Betrayal to your allies. Betrayal to your allies. And in this world of, God is very involved in the affairs of human beings, and God sees what's going on, and it matters to God. So if you're violating treaties to the Benjamites, and you're making friends with the enemy of the Benjamites, you are assaulting God. You're a traitor. And you're not just a traitor to your family, but you're a traitor to God, because these pledges, these loyalties are loyalties that are formed in the common experience that these are my sisters and brothers who've come up out of Egypt with me, and we have inherited this land, and we live together, and we cannot have anybody divide us against each other. David, assuming the Psalter is David, the one who wrote the psalm, is accused, and let me read it to you from this. Let me see if I can find it so I can read actually, and you can say, what is he talking about? In verse 3, O Lord my God, if I have done this thing, If there is injustice in my hands, now here's what it is. If I have repaid my ally with treachery, there it is. Verse 4, that's the charge. If I have repaid my ally with treachery and rescued his adversary. If I have rescued the enemy of my friend, then let an enemy pursue me and overtake me, and let them trample my life into the earth, and let them lay my glory into the dust. So the Psalter is aware that what he's being accused of is a betrayal that deserves his death. There's no doubt about that. Now notice the psalm begins this way. Lord, I have sought refuge in you. Save me from all my pursuers and deliver me, lest they should rip me up like a lion, tearing me up with no deliverer. O Lord my God, if I have done this thing, if there is injustice in my hands, do away with me. So it's an appeal. The Psalter is making an appeal to his innocence before God and is claiming not to say, oh, it's not a big deal what they're claiming about me. He's agreeing that what I'm being accused of is a heinous thing. It's a terrible thing. But the appeal to God is to say, we say this phrase, right? As God is my witness, I did not do this. I did not do this. I'm being accused of something that I did not do. And all the imagery, a very graphic imagery in here of, asking for deliverance, but also saying, if I'm guilty, just destroy me, like rip me up like a lion. I have sought refuge in you. The experience of deliverance which the psalmist sought would be part of the continuing relationship with God. It was not new. It was not new for this psalter, this writer, to appeal to God for help in the broken circumstances of life. And in this case, when they are innocent, when they did not do it, they are not guilty. Deliver me, O God. And then getting into this, the prayer, the song begins to develop clearly. Rise up, O Lord, in your anger, and lift yourself up against the fury of my enemies. Awake, O my God, you have appointed a judgment. Here the Psalter is saying, is appealing to the great wise judge. Is looking for a court of the divine to be assembled. He's asking for divine arbitration. He's asking that God actually gets involved. Now it's interesting how this works, because there's no thought that God is actually going to convene a court downtown in the center of town and sit on a throne. But what the Psalter is pleading for is, there's a sense in this time that justice will prevail. That's the belief. Now, I don't know, in the world we live in today, I'm not so sure that we carry that optimism around a lot. That justice will prevail. And that God is not fooled, God is not deceived, and that ultimately, the way you see, what the Psalter is appealing to is not it's not vindication in life after death. That's not what he's interested in. He's interested in saying, God, do what you do. Do what you do. And what does God do? Well, I'm going to say it, and then we'll read it. What God does is that if there are people out there in this Psalter's life who are telling destructive stories about what he has done that are not true, how does the saying go? You you sow seeds of anger, you will reap the fruit of anger. You sow seeds of lies, you will reap the fruits of lies. You cannot go out in this world and lay foundations of justice and defamation and destruction that cause people like this one to be destroyed and then think that that's the end of it. It will not be, because God is not asleep. Awake, O God. See what's happening here and do what you do. And there's a lot of imagery around, sharpen your bow and get ready. God gets ready. I'm going to read that, that part of it. If one does not repent, God will whet his sword. He has bent and strung his bow. He has prepared his deadly weapons, making his arrows fiery shafts. See, what the Psalter is praying for is that the courts of heaven are seeing what's taking place, seeing his innocence. Now, let me stick a sentence in here. The Psalter is not declaring that he is innocent of all crimes. He's not. What he is declaring is, I didn't do this. I did not betray the tribal family. I did not. And I did not aid the enemy of the Benjamites. I did not do this. It's a terrible thing. I did not do it. And by the way, it appears that the person writing this has fled into the temple, into the sanctuary of like the church, and is praying this prayer from inside the walls of protection, where there are always some rules about where you could pursue people to and where you couldn't. But clearly, the people who started this rumor, who told this story, now inflamed the Benjamites, and the Benjamites are coming after him. Cush, the Benjamite, is pursuing him and has every intention of executing him. Now, Cush was an ally. The Benjamites were more allies of Saul than they were of David, so I don't know whether they're the ones who started the rumor and then to justify the fact that they wanted to pursue David as a king and kill him or whatever. I don't know. Or whether someone, the way the world goes today, enemies don't need to come and fight their fights. They whip other people up, believing that you've done something terrible, and then they go. What's the phrase they use? That they have. They use mind control almost, and they I'm trying to think of what they radicalize. They radicalize people with stories and ideas and rumors, and they get them whipped up, and then they go and create an assault against someone who they believe has harmed them or done something bad. And so you have this conflict that takes place, and the person who started the conflict is standing back and watching it happen. This is, of course, of what people in the United States are accusing both China and Russia of doing through the internet capacity these days, is whipping us up to be enemies of each other. It's a great strategy. And so it doesn't say in here, all you hear in here is that this person is saying, I have not done this. I did not do this. But then, in the appeal to God, it's like, God, convene your court. You are the one who knows what actually has happened and hasn't happened, and you know I did not do this. So convene your court, get ready, and do what you do, which is that if you, what is that phrase about reaping the whirlwind? If you sow into the wind, you will reap the whirlwind. It's a firm belief in life, in the culture of the Hebrew people, that when they say that God is in control of the world, they mean that what underlies the foundations of what goes on in life is that justice will prevail. And if you engage in injustice, if you engage in cheating and lying and stealing, that you will ultimately pay the price. You will be, your deeds will be revealed. And not just in the end of life, but there's a belief that, you reap what you sow. And so this person, David or whoever it is saying, get ready, get the reaper ready, because these people are sowing terrible lies against me. Let the assembly of peoples be gathered around you, and over it take your seat on high, God. And then he makes this statement that is underlying this sense of how is the world structured, how does it work? That the Lord judges the peoples. Judge me, O Lord, according to your justice. The English translations use the word righteousness, which I think is an unnecessary religious distraction. Judge me according to my justice and according to the integrity that is in me. You know my heart, O God. Now, let me talk a little bit about the location of this psalm in the season of Lent. A lot of Lent is a willingness, which I'm sure is a part of the prayer of this person as well, to own up to the things we have done, to be more willing to be confessional, to be willing to say, I have done this, God, and forgive me, show me mercy. And that's another side of how God carries this out. God is not unrelenting in the pursuit of justice. If you repent, if this Psalter, if this guy had actually done this thing, then the conversation in relationship with God would be different. They would be saying, look, I know I've done wrong. I'm throwing myself on your mercy, O God. Save me. And so in this idea of this foundation of justice, God's justice is always married to mercy. But what's going on here is that the Psalter is saying, I didn't do this. I did not do this, and I am being destroyed by evil people out there. And so in the first realm of it, the Psalter is saying, call the courts and let the court of heaven see that I am in this case innocent and that they are the perpetrators of evil. It's a beautiful description. See how they conceive evil, and they are pregnant with mischief, and they bring forth lies. They make a pit, digging it out. Now, here's what he wants to have happen. See this imagery here? They make a pit, digging it out, and they fall into the hole that they have made. Their mischief returns upon their own heads, and their own heads, on their own heads, their violence descends. This is the worldview of the Israelites. You cannot mock God. For a season, you can for a season think that by cheating another or falsely accusing someone and gaining stature over them by falsely accusing them, you might think that you're moving ahead. But you've heard this reference to the long arc of history is bent towards justice. That's dusting off this same worldview, and that is, I know that in the end, God will punish the wicked, and God will vindicate the righteous. Now, there's one last movement in this that I want to talk about, but after the prayer for arbitration and the promise that God will, or the reminder that God does this, that evil is like a boomerang. Evil, you throw the evil act into the wind, and the wind brings it back and hits you, the one who launched the boomerang, bringing back on its perpetrators the wickedness planned for others. This is a big part of faith. Now, What it requires, though, is it requires a kind of understanding that while you know that God sees and knows the truth, and you hold on to the fact that God will reap vengeance on those who are trying to destroy you. But as the prayer ends, there is an acquiescence. 17, I will give to the Lord the thanks due to God's justice, and sing praise to the name of the Most High. Now, as I was studying this text, what came to my mind are these stories that I've seen over the past year of people who are falsely accused. You know, the justice system in our country it's a worked out system. How do we approximate justice? It matters. Crime needs to be punished, and the innocent need to be shown to be innocent and set free. So a jury, a trial by jury and trial by a judge, a trial, a hearing, evidence presented, and then decisions are made. And we are aware, it's not perfect. Nothing in this life is perfect. We do not believe for a minute that the decision of 12 jurors who have heard all the evidence that was able to be gathered is going to deliver the definitive truth or falsity of what's going on. I have a good friend who has argued cases before the Supreme Court. And he told me in one conversation, and it really upset me, that the purpose of the American court system is not to determine the truth. I said, what do you mean? He said, the court system is not determined. The court system is designed to reward the best argument. And I said, well, what are you talking about? And he said, well, if the court was interested in the truth, why don't they let the jury interview the witnesses? Why don't they let them ask the witnesses questions directly? Why is it so contained in terms of the prosecutor and then the defense asks a question? And why aren't the jurors allowed? They do not have a conversation. They do not talk to the accused, and they do not talk to the witnesses. And, you know, I don't know. I took a couple of courses in law in college, but I didn't go to law school. And it was a shock to me to realize that what he was saying was right. Prosecutors design their work to convince the jury of their point of view. And the prosecutor's job is to find the accused guilty. If the prosecutor believes the evidence is there, and then they begin and they fold out the plan to get the person convicted. Now, I'm saying all that because I started into this by talking about the number of people who are being exonerated and discovered that they have been imprisoned for years for crimes they did not commit. Some of them on death row for years, waiting for the administration of the government to decide whether they should be put to death or not. And some of them have been put to death. And the point the Psalter is making, first of all, the thing I want to say is, how difficult must it be? I was reading the description of one such person who was accused of a heinous crime, multiple murders. He did not, unfortunately, he was also black. A lot of this, the record shows, a lot of this has to do with racial prejudice, that the court is not, like David says about God, the court is not immune to prejudice and prejudging and making a decision because of how the person looks or who they are. See, God's justice is not like that. God's justice is pure. The judgment is pure, and the courts that are convened, God knows the truth. So, so does the accused who was innocent. He knows the truth. The Psalter is saying, I know the truth. I did not do this. And I try to think about what is the posture then of people who are accused falsely, and they're serving jail time, and they're in their cell. The one guy described his cell as 4 feet by 3 feet, and he would go in his cell. He was in solitary confinement. He would walk around, he'd sort of spin around and really get dizzy, and then for 20 minutes every day, he was allowed out into a similar size cell on the outside to get some fresh air. And he was innocent. And he's now been released. I don't know, it was 25 years. 25 years of being falsely accused with the threat of the death penalty hanging over his head. What the Psalter does here is the Psalter says this. I think I can get this out as I thought about it when I was reading it. I am innocent. I know I'm innocent. God knows I'm innocent. And the arc of history will bend towards proving my innocence. But in the meantime, I am thought of as guilty. My reputation is being trashed. I'm being dragged through the dirt and the mud and accused of all kinds of things that I didn't do. Now I can rage. I can rage against that. I can go in my cell every day and bang my head, and I probably would. Listen, but what the Psalter does is, the Psalter says, I would rather keep intact my faith, my confidence in God, who God is and what God knows, and my confidence that in the end, perpetrators of evil will pay for their evil, and that God knows of my innocence. So I will rest in that. That's why it ends in a laudatory prayer to God. I will give to the Lord the thanks due to God's justice. It might not be worked out. The doors of the temple might be burst open, and they might come running in, and they might hang me or torture me or do whatever they want because their belief in this false accusation against me. But I will rest myself in this truth. God knows the truth. And perpetrators of evil cannot escape. See, this is what it means to be a person of faith in God. There's no alternative way of seeing it. Here is the faith of the Psalter. Life is chaotic. It's broken. Things happen that shouldn't happen. They do. But God is awake. God is listening. God is watching. And God knows your heart. God knows the truth. I don't know what people who are imprisoned falsely do to get comfort. I'm sure there are stories of those who are imprisoned falsely and then they take their own life because it's such a story of despair. But there are many, many stories of people who face these unthinkable circumstances. The bars of the jail are impenetrable. You are going to spend the rest of your life in jail for a crime you didn't commit. Now, on the outside, the justice movements that are going on today are going on in the name of God. They're enormously motivated people seeking justice and justice reform to say, we've got to go back and review these cases and find out how much prejudice, how much hatred, how much was the court that was convened the day this person was found guilty, how much was that court not like the courts of God, where justice and righteousness prevailed. There was a situation, I'm going to say it was 8, 9 years ago, in the neighboring state of Pennsylvania here, where a judge, I don't know at what level, I think it was a county judge, but he was a juvenile judge. And cases of juvenile misconduct were brought before this judge. And he had a lot of power. But what was discovered, I'll go to the end first, what was discovered was that he had made a deal with the juvenile detention center. And the juvenile detention center was a privately run jail. And this judge and the owner of the detention center had worked out a cash exchange. And so this judge was getting teenagers brought before him, and he was sentencing them to enormous terms of punishment in the jail. Now, I'm not even sure they were innocent of everything. But the point is, the judge was predisposed to find them guilty because he was getting paid. For every person, every juvenile that he sent to that detention center, he got paid. This is the reality in human life. Justice is not always present. Judges are, juries are, prosecutors and defenders are. But, folks, human beings make all kinds of a mess of the system. And so my heart went out, it still goes out to those young people who were sent to jail, whose parents had to live through the awful disgrace of their children being sentenced to 3 and 4, 5 years in jail. And then to discover that the motivation behind the sentencing was financial profit for the judge. Terrible, terrible. You know, so here the assaulter is being accused of violation of a treaty, of making an ally's enemy your friend. That's terrible betrayal. It's terrible betrayal. But terrible betrayal happens in human life. People do not keep their promises. They do not. We do not. And in the pathway of Lent, the right path is to own up to those things and to admit to them and to say, I've done this or I shouldn't have done this. But in this case, this is unique in that the Psalter is saying, but wait, what am I supposed to do because I didn't do this? And so faith leads this Psalter to say, okay, God is on the throne. What that means is that God sees, God knows my heart. God knows I'm innocent. And eventually, as the days go on, those who perpetrated the evil and the charges of evil against me are moving one day closer always to God's justice being worked out in their life. They dug a pit for me to fall in, and they will fall in it themselves. That's the pathway of faith. That's the journey of faith. Now, I'm not saying from this that you do nothing to defend yourself. I'm not saying that. This is a unique situation. This guy's outnumbered. The rumors about him are determined. They are true. And it's a terrible thing. You know, it's a terrible thing. Accusations against people sometimes are thought to be true just because you're accused. It's very, very hard when you're in a position of leadership and you're accused of doing something, especially if you didn't do it. Because the more you try to defend yourself, the more you look like you're trying to cover up that you did it. The takeaway here is that in our journey during the season of Lent, we are called upon in our faith to believe that in spite of whatever actually happens in our life, that God and justice and love and mercy are still in charge in the world. And it may not look at today. Today may not bear the marks of it. But in faith, we give thanks to God because we know that the world is created by God. And I have to say, sometimes if you're waiting for this vindication, for the boomerang to come back and to hit those who've committed evil against you, it may not happen even in your lifetime. Later on when the nation of Israel is plundered and destroyed and whatever, the theology moves on to say that, the vindication of the Lord will come. It just won't come in your generation. It may take a generation or two, but ultimately, the judgment of God will come to pass. It's an enormously optimistic view. It's the view of the theology of both the people of the Hebrews and ultimately of Christianity. Now, there's lots of Christians that get drawn aside on these issues. This is a hard commitment of our faith, to hold on to the ultimate vindication that will come for the innocent in the world. But it gives us a model, and that is that when we are being accused of something that we did not do, going to the Lord in prayer and reminding yourself that God's courts of judgment are not influenced by the evil. And that ultimately, the way things happen in life is you get what you sow. And in the meantime, I'd rather be on good terms with God and trust my life into that with God than I would be out there in the rough seas of simply trying to just, return evil for evil and seeing to it that my enemies are now destroyed because they've lied about me. That's not the path the Psalter takes. He ends with this prayer of adoration. I give thanks to the Lord, and I give the thanks due to God for God's justice. And I sing praise to the name of the Lord, the Most High. It's a great posture. It's a great posture for those who experience injustice in their lives. The commentator writes, "We do not know from the psalm whether the falsely accused was finally vindicated or whether his name was cleared. We know only that he came into such a knowledge of God that he could accept his lot. It's clear that the psalmist desired and legitimately desired an immediate acquittal from the charges laid against him and their consequences. And he desired it in the here and now, in the middle of the crisis, not it's some far-off thing. He wanted to be vindicated now. He was innocent. But all else remains uncertain. We are not told that he lived happily ever after. The psalm thus produces an appropriate perspective for dealing with the common experience of false accusation. It is legitimate to take the problem to God in prayer. And since God is a righteous God, we may hope for justice and acquittal." And here's the point that I'm reading this paragraph. "But whether or not we perceive that justice is done, we require the proper perspective. It is better to maintain integrity and to continue to suffer injustice than to sell out to evil and form ranks with the unrighteous." That, my friends, is Psalm 7 for your edification, for your thinking, and for your prayers. And I'm glad to have shared it with you today, and I hope it works to help and strengthen your journey of faith, especially in times where you're being accused falsely and don't know what to do. God bless you, my friends. Tonight at 7 o'clock, we'll be right here, and I'll be doing a 15-minute devotion meditation for the season of Lent. It's been good to be with you. Thank you. And I'll see you tonight, or actually I'll be back this afternoon at 2 o'clock for the pastor's chat as well. I'm all over the internet on YouTube these days. God bless you.